HPPodcraft.com.
Are you ready? I'm ready.
In my tortured ears there sounds unceasingly a nightmare whirring and flapping, and a faint, distant baying as of some gigantic hound. It is not dream, it is not, I fear, even madness, for too much has already happened to give me these merciful doubts. St. John is a mangled corpse. I alone know why, and such is my knowledge that I am about to blow out my brains for fear I shall be mangled in the same way. Down unlit and illimitable corridors of eldritch fantasy sweeps the black, shapeless nemesis that drives me to self-annihilation.
You know what else is sweeping down unlit and illimitable corridors? This podcast.
Yeah, woo!
Yeah!
The second season has begun. I'm scared by that. You know, Chad.
Yeah.
Chad
Fifer. That's who I am, folks. I'm Chad Fifer. I'm back.
Yeah, you're back. And also Chris Lackey's back. That's me.
Yay! And we're back with the HP Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
At HPPodcraft.com. We're back.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
And reader today is a fresh face here, or voice, I should say, on the HP Lovecraft Literary Podcast. Anthony Tedesco, who is a performer here in Los Angeles.
Oh, he's fresh.
He is fresh.
So we're doing The Hound. Did we say that?
Yeah, no, we didn't say that. This week's story is The Hound. That was written in 1922, but it wasn't published until 24, I think, with Weird Tales.
So that's a pretty quick turnaround for
It is a pretty
HBO.
quick turnaround. Yeah.
And this is sort of a return to the uber Gothic ornateness of the outsider, or the statement of Randolph Carter. And it follows the model of Randolph Carter or Herbert West, in that there's the protagonist, unnamed in this one, and then sort of the dominating partner, who is St. John, who is referenced in the first paragraph. Right. And these guys, what we get from this is that what we're about to find out is that they're just bored. I mean,
well, they're just so bored they can't. It's just ruined their lives, and so they're looking for any kind of thrills they can get,
which leads to a dangerous practice.
Wearied with the commonplaces of a prosaic world where even the joys of romance and adventure soon grow stale, St. John and I had followed enthusiastically every aesthetic and intellectual movement which promised respite from our devastating ennui. The enigmas of the symbolists and the ecstasies of the pre-Raphaelites all were ours in their time, but each new mood was drained too soon of its diverting novelty and appeal. Only the somber philosophy of the decadence could hold us, and this we found potent only by increasing gradually the depth and diabolism of our penetrations. Baudelaire and Huysmans were soon exhausted of thrills, till finally there remained for us only the more direct stimuli of unnatural personal experiences and adventures. It was this frightful emotional need which led us eventually to that detestable course which, even in my present fear, I mention with shame and timidity, that hideous extremity of human outrage, that abhorred practice of grave robbing.
Wow.
Yeah.
So these guys are so bored that the only thing that's giving them a thrill anymore is robbing graves.
Right.
And you know what? I would have to say that thanks to snowboarding, grave robbing has gone way down.
It's true.
Because it's an extreme sport.
Yeah. No, I read all about that at the X Games,
Thanks to X Games, there is like 150% less grave robbing that goes on nowadays.
If only they'd had that snowboarding in
the those guys that's what they'd be doing. They'd be out snowboarding.
No Hound.
No.
Well, I have to say that rereading this several weeks ago, which I did, I began to feel that there was a sort of homosexual vibe to this piece. Maybe more so than other works.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there in Hypnos. It's in a few of the stories. I don't know, I just wanted to talk about it. I saw it came up on the message boards a while
It did.
ago. I think when we did Hypnos.
Yeah, we did Hypnos. I mean, yeah, there can be an argument made. Again, neither Chad nor myself are psychologists.
Yeah. Well, nor would I endeavor to... I mean, I always try to be very careful to make judgments about an author based on what they write.
Right.
Because it's fiction, right? And ultimately, this question doesn't even matter. But he does... Well, okay, first of all, there's obvious unintentional things in that last paragraph that we heard, like the depth and diabolism of our penetrations,
yes.
or unnatural personal experiences and adventures. Maybe they're metaphors.
Right. Or... And the argument has been made by you... that this is a very common thing that happens in Lovecraft's writings. He's got a protagonist, or the narrator of the story, is hanging out with another man, and they're doing secret stuff away from everybody else, off together. One is the narrator is usually the submissive, and the other person is the more domineering personality. It's the same with Herbert West, same with Randall Carter, same with Hypnos. That there's, and then in this, and then the Hound.
And it's that they spend these long periods of time together in isolation. There's no mention of other relationships. Family or love interests or anything like that.
No.
So, I mean, I don't think it's absurd to ask the question.
Oh, no, not at all.
That there's some kind of implied, gay relationship.
Lovecraft said that the idea of homosexuality didn't even occur to him until he was like in his mid-20s, which could just him saying stuff, just to throw people off if he was gay. But maybe...
Well, in his defense, I used to listen to the Village People. I had no idea they were gay.
No, of course not.
I was very little, though.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, I watched the Village People. Frankie Goes to Hollywood, you know?
No idea.
No idea.
Great musicians.
Yeah, there's some good stuff. And if Lovecraft was gay, he was probably just totally repressed. I mean, it's very possible, because it was so not even an option at that time, that he just suppressed any feelings that he may have had, if he was.
Right. And I guess what leads me to that, too, when I read this, is if he felt that way, I'm sure that he would feel that it was forbidden and diabolic and unnatural.
Right.
If he had those desires, and so something as despicable as grave robbing or being obsessed with the dead perhaps is something that a self-hating, repressed person, might feel.
Yeah, it's possible. Absolutely.
And that's where I'm going to end that psychology. because I read it and it's about grave robbing, and I don't assume that Lovecraft robbed graves either.
No, of course not.
And also,
but it's end of the day, it is interesting. I mean, this is something that you and I have spoken about a lot. And on the other end of it, I mean, there's something to it. This just wouldn't come up as often as it does if there wasn't something to it.
True.
I think on the other end of this, it may be that Lovecraft just never really had any close male friends.
Right. And somebody made that point on the message boards, and I think, well, if I was going to make an assessment.
Julie of 19 Nocturne Boulevard was the one who said, it's like when you're a kid, you have these really close friendships, like where you go out on adventures together, you have sleepovers, you do all this stuff. Not sexual, nothing sexual about it. But Lovecraft, the way he grew up, kind of alone and away from people, he never had that really close male bond with anybody. So all of these could just be that.
Yeah, him just imagining a friendship. Now, I mean, and he got married and he had relationships with women and he had lots of correspondences with other guys, but perhaps he just always thought, oh man, I really wish I just had somebody I was really close to who shared my interests.
Right, yeah.
And it could just be as simple as that.
Yeah.
Or he always felt that it was a convenient device to have two guys, one to narrate and one to do the bad stuff.
Right. Right, yeah.
Another thing that this story made me think of was about Leopold and Loeb, the murderers.
Right.
Now, they didn't commit those murders. Actually, I think they did it in 1924.
24.
So he wrote this before that, but
yeah.
Wait a minute, maybe they read this story and they were... I mean, that's a very famous case, but Leopold and Loeb were these college students who sort of were motivated by some of the same things as the protagonist in this story. They were bored with life, they wanted a thrill, and so they constructed the perfect murder of a friend of theirs to sort of get that thrill of the kill.
Right.
And they killed him. I think they bludgeoned him to death and then burned his body with acid and made a couple of mistakes that had them found out. And they took on Clarence Darrow as their...
Yes, Clarence Darrow of the Skokes monkey trial.
That's right. And there's been a couple of... Rope was a play that was written about them that was then adapted by Alfred Hitchcock, which I really like and really reminds me of this. In fact, one of them died in prison. I read about it today because I didn't really know what ever happened to these guys. Well, Darrow did an excellent job. He got them life imprisonment instead of being put to death. His argument being that, look, in college they taught all these guys about Nietzsche and the Superman.
Oh, man.
And all they did was just take it way too far. So are they to blame? I mean really crazy. I mean, but he did a great job, and he managed to get these guys life imprisonment. And Leopold, actually, he got out in the 50s.
Oh, really?
On bail, and he moved to Puerto Rico, where he worked in a lab for the rest of his life. He died in the 70s.
Not on bail. He got out on parole.
He got out on parole. That would be the correct correct word. But yeah, so he actually got out of jail at one point.
Wow.
Loeb got killed in prison.
Do you remember, I think it was with you, we went to that Museum of Death.
Yeah,
in San Diego.
Definitely made me think of the Museum of Death. Yeah.
Right, yeah. There was this one where it was really gruesome murder it was a woman, and her boyfriend killed her husband. And they took all of these pictures of them doing, chopping up the body and them posing with his body parts in really degrading and humiliating ways. And then they took that film to like Kmart to get it developed.
Yeah, exactly.
And they called the cops and, but what this reminds me of is when we were there, the woman who didn't actually kill him,
right?
Her boyfriend killed him. She was just part of the murder. She was out of jail by the time we were already at the, because it said she was released and he's going to be released like 10 years from now.
Yeah, that exhibit I remember so well because the heading over it said, "Welcome to the shallow end of the gene pool." And then it was just the entire roll of film of those people and what they did with this corpse of the husband. It was really horrifying. That, I think, is up on Hollywood Boulevard in Los Angeles now, the Museum of Death.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. But when we went, it was... Maybe,
it was in San Diego.
It was in San Diego.
Right.
And this is a good lead into our next paragraph because the thing about it that was so interesting about the Museum of Death was that it was in this basement in the gas lamp district. And so you had to go down these stairs, and then each room had different sort of death-related exhibits. There were like babies' coffins, and then they had Faces of Death on a loop in one thing, and then they had the room where they corresponded with serial killers and all their letters.
Right.
And you just really got this feeling of revulsion.
Right, yeah.
Crime scene photos everywhere. That when you left the basement and you got to the surface, you're like, thank God I'm alive.
Right.
It's similar to what these guys do.
I cannot reveal the details of our shocking expeditions, or catalog even partly the worst of the trophies adorning the nameless museum we prepared in the great stone house where we jointly dwelled, alone and servantless. Our museum was a blasphemous, unthinkable place where, with the satanic taste of neurotic virtuosi, we had assembled an universe of terror and decay to excite our jaded sensibilities. It was a secret room, far, far underground, where huge winged demons carven of basalt and onyx vomited from wide, grinning mouths weird green and orange light, and hidden pneumatic pipes ruffled into kaleidoscopic dances of death, the lines of red carnal things, hand in hand, woven in voluminous black hangings. Through these pipes came at will the odors our moods most craved. Sometimes the scent of pale funeral lilies, sometimes the narcotic incense of imagined eastern shrines of the kingly dead, and sometimes, oh, how I shudder to recall it, the frightful, soul-upheaving stenches of the uncovered grave.
Yeah. So we had the guys had their own little museum down there.
Yeah, and I mean they really did because they have smell-o-vision.
Yeah, lots of really
getting piped in. And, well, they're very aesthetically based, which is interesting. So these guys, they're bored by everything. They have ennui. They like robbing graves, but it's very important that the scene is great. Like when they rob the graves,
the weather's got to be just right. Yeah. The moonlight has to be just right.
Right. It says
the predatory excursions on which we collected our unmentionable treasures were always artistically memorable events. We were no vulgar ghouls, but worked only under certain conditions of mood, landscape, environment, weather, season, and moonlight.
Very meticulous. I hate to say it, but they were artists in a sense. Like they wanted to have this experience, and they wanted it to be just a very specific way.
It's impressive to say, look, if I'm going to make a memory, I want it to be really good.
Yeah.
This is going to be a notable thing that I do, and it's repulsive, and I want to make sure that it's just right.
I mean, typically people don't even, I would only say for special occasions like a wedding. Mm-hmm. For the listeners, I'm recently wed. That's why we had our season break, is because
he was off honeymooning.
And married. I got married before.
Honeymoon bogging.
And Chad was with me he was my best man in the wedding. And
what the honeymoon brings.
And he was not, but of course not on the honeymoon.
It was a great wedding, by the way, and it was really wonderful.
Yeah,
it was 20 style, but it didn't have any of this debauchery.
No.
Diabolism involved.
Andrew Lehman, who reads for us, was at the wedding, and he came up to me and said, because we're all dressed very period, he goes, I'm just waiting for the scream, the blood-curdling scream to happen. But as I was saying, taking the time to anticipate a memory, I want this to be perfect. This perfect lighting. I want the music to be perfect. I want all these things to be perfect because I want a beautiful memory. And that's what these guys are doing, except they're doing it with really effed up stuff.
Right. So this draws us, the protagonist asks himself this question. He says,
but what malign fatality were we lured to that terrible Holland churchyard? I think it was the dark rumor of legendry that Tales of one buried for 5 centuries who had himself been a ghoul in his time and had stolen a potent thing from a mighty sepulchre.
Yeah, so this guy that they want to rob the grave of, he himself was a grave robber.
Yeah.
So they're like, hey, this is the uber grave robbing. Like we're going to make this happen by stealing from a guy who stole from a really ancient grave.
Right.
This awesome thing, this amulet.
And it sort of reminded me of Randolph Carter, statement of Randolph Carter a bit, that there's this sorcerer in the ground who's maybe not decayed as much as he should.
Right.
That sort of thing. And I love when he recalls the scene in which they dig the guy up. And you really have to just read this yourselves to get the hilarity of it. He goes through this almost 12 days of Christmas description of it. And it's amazing. He said there's the moon over the graves, the grotesque trees, the legions of colossal bats, the antique ivied church, the phosphorescent insects, the odors of vegetation.
Right.
Each one of these clauses in the sentence has even more detail in it.
Yeah.
And then, he repeats this list a few times in the story every time he talks about revisiting this grave and digging it up, which I think lends itself to this theory that Joshi put forth in this annotation, that it's, to an extent, this is self-parody.
Yeah. I mean,
he's kind of being overblown on purpose.
It really does seem like it is a self-parody. However, Lovecraft didn't like this story. He said, what did he called it? A dead dog and a piece of junk later on in his career.
Maybe he was pretty serious about it. And then...
he maybe was serious. But, it seems like, there's so obviously Poe stuff in this. Like,
right.
Later on in the story, he talks about a gentle tapping, rapping at my door, and there's the oblong box, Red Death, brought on by the Hound. Like, he's being obvious about...
It's one of his Poe stories.
Yeah, but he's being really obvious about it, to
True.
the point that it seems like it is a joke. And Joshi might be right about that. And maybe Lovecraft just later on just didn't like his joke and just...
Right.
And, people were just like, nobody got that it was a joke.
Nobody got that it was funny.
Maybe that's why he didn't like it.
The last thing on the list of things that he experiences when he's out there in the graveyard, the partridge in the pear tree, so to speak, is...
Worst of all, the faint, deep-toned baying of some gigantic hound which we could neither see nor definitely place. As we heard the suggestion of baying, we shuddered, remembering the tales of the peasantry. For he whom we sought had centuries before been found in this self-same spot, torn and mangled by the claws and teeth of some unspeakable beast.
Yeah.
Now, that confuses me. He got killed right in the same spot where he's buried.
That's what I got out of it.
So was that the sorcerer that he ripped off then? Was he grave robbing?
Oh, no. I think he got it from someplace else, but I think that was just the place that he died.
Oh, okay.
I don't think that was the original place of it.
When they open the coffin, they find the body.
Yes, yeah.
Right, it's got an amulet around it.
It's got an amulet. The body has an amulet around it, and then it's kind of it's a corpse. It's kind of a white gray, your typical corpse fare.
Yeah. It has, it's been crushed by giant jaws.
Right.
They killed it.
Yes.
But around the neck of the corpse, of this skeleton, that's where they find that necklace, which they steal.
Right. But the amulet has got a kind of a dog with wings sort of creature on it. When it's description, they talk about it having it seems could be a sphinx, but with like a dog's jaws on it.
And, before we go on, we're talking about these imitations. I mean, clearly he had read The Hound of the Baskervilles.
Right, yeah.
Which came out in, 1902, 03, 04, around that. Which has a giant hound stalking the moors.
Yes.
And I think it's because, it's been a long time since I've read that book, but it's the reason the hound is on the moors is because of some satanic misdoings of a person centuries ago in this family line.
Right. Well, that's the legend. I mean, you find out. You find out.
But that's the legend. So I mean, in a way, it might not be self-parody. This is almost like straight up parody in a certain respect. So anyway, they find the body. They see the corpse. It's fresher than they would have thought. It's got this amulet, and the amulet has this sort of it's almost carved in an oriental fashion, and it's jade, and it's got some inscription and characters that they can't identify, and it's got that skull. They know they have to have that.
Oh, yeah.
So they just
rip
it
awesome.
off.
Yeah,
immediately.
They're like, boom.
Yeah, but there's another reason that they stole this thing from the body. It's because...
we recognized it as the thing hinted of in the forbidden Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred, the ghastly soul symbol of the corpse-eating cult of inaccessible Leng in Central Asia. All too well did we trace the sinister lineaments described by the old Arab demonologist. Lineaments, he wrote, drawn from some obscure supernatural manifestation of the souls of those who, vexed and gnawed at the dead.
Yeah. So that is the first mention by H.P. Lovecraft of the Necronomicon.
Right.
It's the first time we hear about it. It's that second mention of good old Abdul al-Hazred. Why can't I say
Abdul
that?
al-Hazred was mentioned before in the Nameless City. And there have been some references to what may have been the Necronomicon, but this is the first time it's actually named.
Right.
It's something that people own and they can reference.
Right, yep.
Here it is. And so, I mean, we've talked about the Necronomicon before, but but it is the premiere. I mean, what's significant about that?
Well, it gets used in a lot of other stories
Right.
that are coming up, and it is, I mean, not only used in other stories, but other writers and filmmakers, and I mean, it's, I would have to say, probably the most used Lovecraft invention in film and literature and music.
Yeah, definitely.
So, boom, this is the genesis of it right there.
So they grab that amulet, which they heard of in the Necronomicon. Oh, wait, you know what? Before we move on, though, they something else in here. Lang, he says...
right, the Plateau of Lang is mentioned in Salafeus.
Right.
Not sure exactly where it's placed in Central Asia here.
Yeah. But they also reference it in the Dreamlands as well.
Right, and also in Antarctica.
Right.
So, not exactly sure what's up with Lang.
So they grab that Necronomicon amulet, and they take off for home from Holland, and they think they hear that hound baying, as they go. And from there, we move into the second movement in the story, or maybe chapter, I don't know. There's a 2 before it.
Yeah.
And that starts with an excellent sentence.
Less than a week after our return to England, strange things began to happen.
like the simplest sentence of the whole thing. I love it. I mean, that's a pretty accurate description. There's bumps in the night. Yep. They see shadows at the windows.
They hear the bang.
They hear the bang occasionally.
It gets closer and closer.
I mean, it may be because they're basically worshiping at the amulet. They put it down in their little basement, and they're doing rites around it and burning incense to it. They kind of build a little shrine around it. And the reading in the Necronomicon. I don't know how they got a copy of this thing, but
probably Robin Graves. A lot of sorcerers are buried with the Necronomicon. Yeah. If I was a sorcerer,
yeah. You're not going to leave that out.
No. And you're not going to take, like, the Wind in the Willows with you. You want the Necronomicon. It'll be useful.
Well, so they're hearing bumps in the night, and then that same opening paragraph, it also ends with a great sentence.
Then terror came.
Then terror.
Excellent.
It's short and to the point.
So, basically, one night, our protagonist, he hears a knock on his chamber door.
Yeah.
Rap.
Rap.
And then only... He asks who it is. He assumes it's St. John, and then he only hears this little shrill laugh. And he opens it up. St. John's not there, so he goes and he gets him. And the two are kind of marching around their house,
trying to figure out where the laughter, where it's coming from.
I mean, they live way out in the middle of nowhere.
They have no servants. No. They have, they live totally by themselves.
Just those two fellas. But they are as much afraid of the police as they are of any hounds.
Right, because they've been doing illegal stuff for years, and they have a basement full of evidence.
But anyway, the knock on the door bothers them.
Right.
Because just the other night, when they were down in their spooky hidden basement, they had heard a low scratching.
Right.
At the door.
Mm-hmm.
When they went to the door and threw it open. They didn't see anything there, but they hear a little laughter and some articulate chatter.
Which
is in the Dutch language.
Yeah, that's one of the best italicized. Yeah. Kenneth Haidt mentions in his book, too, that this is the only time that the words in the Dutch language are used to invoke fear.
In the Dutch language.
Which, of course, is where they found the body.
Right.
So that's why because now they're back in England, which is where they're from.
Right. They start seeing little footprints, unidentifiable, maybe non-human footprints under the library windows. And, they assume they're going mad from studying dead stuff and robbing graves. But in a way, they almost say, well, wouldn't it also be fun if a giant specter was stalking us? You're like, you didn't expect anything about that.
Well, they've gotten some, they wanted a little bit of excitement in their lives.
This is the charge they're looking for.
This is what they want.
The horror reached a culmination on November the 18th, when St. John, walking home after dark from a distant railway station, was seized by some frightful carnivorous thing and torn to ribbons. His screams had reached the house, and I had hastened to the terrible scene in time to hear the whir of wings and see a vague black cloudy thing silhouetted against the rising moon. My friend was dying as I spoke to him, and he could not answer coherently. All he could do was to whisper, like, "The amulet, that damned thing." And then he collapsed, an inert mass of mangled flesh.
Oof. Wow.
Not good.
That is brutal.
Yeah.
It just happened.
And our protagonist, he hears he buries his friend.
Yeah.
In one of their neglected gardens.
Uh-huh.
They're staying, and as he's doing it, he hears that hound getting closer. In fact, I think he throws himself down on the ground and just stays there for hours. Obviously, he can't be alone in their place, so he destroys the basement.
Yep, he gets rid of all their artifacts and treasures. He just burns it, and then he moves down to London.
Throws out the foosball table, and he's back in London. And he feels he's being stalked there as well.
Yeah.
He decides, well, what I have to do is I got to take this amulet back to Holland.
Back in the body. Back to the corpse. Back, just be done with it.
Yeah, return. Unrightful owner, but at least the last guy.
Yeah, he doesn't want anything to do with it anymore. But on his way, when he gets into Holland, some dudes rob him and steal his flippin' amulet.
No amulet.
No, and so he's just like, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, that's, I guess it's not my problem anymore, but
it is his problem.
It is his problem.
Yeah, because that night he hears the bang really loud, and when he wakes up, the incredibly prompt Lovecraft newspaper is there to greet him, and it tells him that a thing had torn to shreds an entire family that was living in this tenement, building. A thieves' den.
Right.
Since it's a thieves' den, we can assume those were the thieves that had robbed him of the amulet.
Right.
They got their just desserts. This is also not good. So finally he goes back to the grave, he digs it up, he fights off a vulture, I think, during that scene.
There was a vulture that starts picking at the ground where he's going to dig, and then he just kills the vulture. He just kills it. Like, I mean...
Why's the bird in here if it's not going to talk? But so he says he removes he digs, he beats off the vulture, and then he gets to the box and he throws open the lid, and he says this is the last rational thing he's done.
For crouched within that centuried coffin, embraced by a close-packed nightmare retinue of huge, sinewy sleeping bats, was the bony thing my friend and I had robbed. Not clean and placid as we had seen it then, but covered with caked blood and shreds of alien flesh and hair, and leering sentiently at me with phosphorescent sockets and sharp and sanguine fangs, yawning twistedly in mockery of my inevitable doom. And when it gave from those grinning jaws a deep, sardonic bay as of some gigantic hound, and I saw that it held in its gory, filthy claw the lost and fateful amulet of green jade, I merely screamed and ran away idiotically, my screams soon dissolving into peals of hysterical laughter.
Whoa. It had phosphorescent sockets. It had glowing eyes.
And the skull had howled. It's so crazy.
It's awesome.
So crazy. I thought it was a great surprise that he opens the grave and it got the amulet back.
Yeah.
Cool, but then it howls. It just really weird. I didn't expect that.
And it's got glowing eyes, man. That's crazy. That's some brutal heavy metal, album cover stuff right there.
Somehow in some form this thing had risen out of the grave and gotten its amulet.
Yeah,
wow.
or it is the Hound, or the guy's the Hound. He's somehow some kind of undead thing now. He did necromantic studies, and now he's become some sort of like I think a lich is what Ken Hite refers to it as, which is like an undead sorcerer, basically. So,
and I think that some people say that this leads to the ghoul mythology within Lovecraft, because ghouls are described as being kind of dog-like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's definitely the beginning of it. Later on, and we get better ghoul descriptions, and other stories. But
anyway, he concludes by saying,
"Madness rides the star wind, claws and teeth sharpened on centuries of corpses." Dripping death astride a bacchanal of bats from night-black ruins of buried temples of Belial. Now, as the bang of that dead, fleshless monstrosity grows louder and louder, and the stealthy whirring and flapping of those accursed web wings circles closer and closer, I shall seek with my revolver the oblivion which is my only refuge from the unnamed and unnameable.
Woof.
Bang!
That is the end.
It's a suicide note.
Heck of a suicide note.
Yeah.
So there we go. That's the Hound is. I like the Hound. I missed that it was comical when I first read it, and it wasn't until I started doing research and rereading the story that I realized that it was definitely overtly Poe and, you know, like even with the lines and things being in there. And with that, I think, yeah, maybe Lovecraft was trying to be funny with it, and it was just too sophisticated.
For me, because I didn't know.
I had no idea.
It's not what I mean, when I read it, I thought, well, wow, he's really overdoing this. But I liked it.
Yeah, no, I like it too. I think this is a cool story. It's tight. It's interesting. You know, a lot happens. He doesn't get too lost in it. You know, I love the Hound.
And it's based in a real perversity.
Yeah.
And that's present in Herbert West, I suppose, all of the screwed up things that they're doing. I don't know, there's something about this and that there's no science driving what they're doing.
No. With Herbert West, they were trying to get knowledge and understanding. With this, they're just looking for kicks.
Right. And he references the decadence, like Baudelaire and these guys who...
Oh, right, yeah.
Who Lovecraft was a devotee of Baudelaire and
oh, yeah.
Possibly, and I know that a lot of people have written about how the Hound is, echoes a lot of the decadent sentiments.
Right.
Which led to symbolism, which is that, we should be writing about the world and experiencing the world as it really is.
Yeah.
And that artists should be able to sort of debase themselves in a sort of spiritual quest, looking for, morality shouldn't exist for the artist.
Right.
That's what these guys are doing, things that are morally and traditionally, culturally wrong, but they're seeking some kind of learning, I suppose.
Yeah. And I mean, they are trying to make it perfect in their own screwed up way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that I wouldn't say it's redeeming in any way,
No.
but it makes me think of in films, where the serial killer is usually this really sophisticated, intelligent
right.
person, and their murder is some kind of art form to them, and so they've got but in the reality of it, though, those people aren't. They're just crazy, and they've got problems, and they're not as clever and as interesting as they're made out to be.
Not at all.
And stuff. No.
Not at all. If you're interested in Mallarmé or Baudelaire or, people who actually were translating Poe in France, I think that there's a lot of literary continuity between this story and that stuff. I have to admit, I'm not that interested in it, so I didn't really want to cover it too much on here.
I read over it. And
yeah. I mean, the story, I like to take the story on its own terms, and I know that Lovecraft is throwing these references in there to Baudelaire, etc., because he wants the reader to possibly check into that stuff a little bit more.
Yeah,
right.
I think so.
You should, but on its face value, the story, I like it.
Yeah, I think it's a cool, creepy story. Just forget about all the layers that Lovecraft obviously put into it. It's just on the surface, it's really cool, and then if you want to dig, you can find lots more great stuff. So I say, yay, Hound. That's the end of this week's podcast. Next week we are doing another H.P. Lovecraft story, The Lurking Fear.
That's by Lovecraft?
It is!
Yay! The Lurking Fear, and then I think after that we've got The Rats in the Walls coming up as well.
We have The Rats in the Walls, and I believe we'll have a guest host for Rats in the Walls.
Oh, excellent.
And we'll keep it secret until I confirm with said guest host to make sure that that's going to happen.
Well, I'm glad to be back.
I am glad to be back. I missed doing this.
Yeah.
Cass getting together with you, Chad, every week and talking about some sweet-ass Lovecraft. And hopefully everybody else is glad that we're back, too.
I hope so.
One of the things I forgot to mention is we are out of the CDs, the Music of the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast, Volume 1. So if you donate, unfortunately, you won't get a CD.
Okay.
But please still donate because we are actually having to move servers because our old host can't provide for us because we are so wildly popular now.
Yay!
Which is great, but unfortunately cost us money because our bandwidth is crazy high now. So
we're gonna figure that out.
So we're working on that. So there might be some website issues. If things freak out, we'll let you know if we're having to move stuff over and there's an address problem or whatever.
And we'll get we're going to have a new promotion coming up soon.
Oh, yes, very soon. In the next week or two, we will announce it. So.
Yeah.
And with that, I'm Chris Lackey.
I'm Chad Fifer.
And this has been the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
HPPodcraft.com.